She thought she could have a black man removed from first class with just a few carefully chosen words until he calmly reached into his pocket and flashed his FBI badge. Vanessa Whitaker walked briskly through Dallas Love Field Airport, her high-end roller bag gliding behind her like a loyal accessory. She had flown this route more times than she could count, Dallas to Washington, D.C., always first class, always expecting the same level of exclusivity she believed she deserved. The ritual comforted her. Priority boarding, chilled Prosecco, the quiet murmur of executives reviewing reports or checking stock portfolios on their tablets. But when she reached her assigned row and spotted a black man already seated next to her in a tailored dark gray suit, her stride faltered for a split second. His posture was relaxed but sharp, laptop open, eyes scanning a document like he was preparing for something significant. Vanessa's lips thinned as she set her oversized tote on the seat with just enough force to make a point. First class wasn't supposed to include surprises like this. Sitting beside her, Malcolm Hayes stayed focused, his fingers moving across the keyboard with ease, unbothered by her presence or her silent disapproval. The soft glow from his screen illuminated the angles of his face, giving him the look of someone who had done this 100 times before. Vanessa, however, refused to let it go. She gave a soft sigh, adjusted her scarf with unnecessary flair, and shifted in her seat just enough to nudge his armrest. Not a glance, not even a flinch. That irritated her more. With a glance around the cabin, she seemed to hope a flight attendant might sense her discomfort and intervene, but none did. So she decided to escalate. Leaning in slightly, her tone airy but pointed, she said, "Excuse me. Are you certain you're in the correct seat?" Without looking up, Malcolm responded, "I am. That was all. No apology, no hesitation." Vanessa blinked, caught off guard by his lack of deference. She cleared her throat, sat up straighter, and waved a hand just enough to catch the attention of a nearby flight attendant. Madison Harper, a professional in her early 30s with years of customer service under her belt, approached with practiced politeness. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" Madison asked. Vanessa let out a light, almost rehearsed laugh. "I think there's been a little mix-up," she said sweetly, tilting her head toward Malcolm. "I believe this gentleman may be sitting in the wrong seat." Madison smiled and pulled up the passenger list on her tablet. After a few quick taps, she glanced at Malcolm, who had now paused his typing and lifted his gaze to meet hers. There was no confusion in his eyes, just calm observation. "Actually, Mr. Hayes is exactly where he should be," she said smoothly. "Your ticket says 1A, and he's seated in 1B. Vanessa's smile tightened, her hand gripping the armrest as though steadying herself. "Really? That's strange." She laughed nervously. "I must have gotten mixed up. Are you absolutely sure?" Madison nodded. "Completely sure, ma'am." Vanessa's face twitched. For just a heartbeat, the polished mask she wore slipped, revealing the irritation beneath. But just as quickly she recovered, forcing a tight-lipped grin. "Well then," she said with a shallow exhale, "carry on. I suppose mistakes happen." She turned back toward the window, but she wasn't done, not even close. Marcus had already resumed typing, completely unbothered. Madison hesitated near the galley, clearly sensing the awkward energy lingering in the air, then offered Marcus a quick, knowing nod before stepping away. But Vanessa wasn't calming down. Her foot tapped rapidly against the floor, her breath coming shallow and quick, her gaze bouncing between the flight crew and Marcus. He didn't flinch, didn't fidget, didn't offer any explanation or acknowledgement. The indifference cut deeper than any argument would have. Vanessa wasn't used to people ignoring her discomfort, especially not people like him. She straightened her posture, arms folded tightly across her chest, stewing in her own indignation. This wasn't how first class was supposed to feel. In her mind, she'd earned this space over years of business travel and corporate loyalty points. And now she felt cornered, powerless, embarrassed. No, she wasn't about to just sit there and swallow it. Vanessa reached up and pressed the call button with 2 sharp taps. The familiar chime echoed overhead. Within seconds, Madison returned, her professional smile intact, but with a slight hesitation this time. "Is there something I can assist you with, ma'am?" Madison asked politely. Vanessa lowered her voice, making sure her tone stayed soft but urgent. "I'd like to switch seats, please." Madison blinked. Is there an issue with the seat? Is it malfunctioning? Vanessa paused just long enough to make it seem like she was carefully choosing her words. She glanced sideways at Marcus, then back at Madison. It's more of a personal comfort issue, she said, her voice low but deliberate. Madison's smile tightened, and she glanced quickly at Marcus, whose hands hovered over his keyboard, completely still now. He wasn't typing. He was listening, observing, not reacting, just watching how far she'd take this. Let me check availability, Madison said quickly, pulling up the passenger manifest on her tablet. Vanessa sat perfectly still, her back rigid against the leather seat, lips pressed so tightly they were nearly white. A few rows ahead, a businessman in a light gray suit lowered his newspaper to listen, pretending to scroll through emails on his phone. Across the aisle, an older couple exchanged glances. Whispers began. Madison's fingers flew across the screen, her brow furrowing as she scrolled through the seat chart. Unfortunately, we're at full capacity in first class today, ma'am, she said softly. There aren't any alternate seats available. Vanessa's stomach dropped. Madison gave her an apologetic smile. If you'd like, I could check for availability in the main cabin. There's an empty seat toward the back. Vanessa's face flushed instantly, her throat tightening as she struggled to process what she'd just heard. Main cabin? Economy? Like she would ever. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words tangled in her throat, refusing to come out. That's not going to work. Madison's smile stayed in place, but there was a new firmness behind it. In that case, I hope you're comfortable remaining in your assigned seat. Vanessa forced a tight, diplomatic smile. Seems like I don't have much choice. Madison nodded politely. If you need anything else, please don't hesitate to ask. Then she turned and walked away. But Vanessa barely noticed. Her pulse was loud in her ears. Marcus, still cool and composed, opened his laptop again and resumed typing like none of this had ever happened. That was it? That was his reaction? Just silence? The complete dismissal made her skin prickle. Her fingers curled tightly in her lap. This wasn't over. Not even close. With a sharp breath, Vanessa reached up and pressed the call button again. The soft chime rang overhead. This time, Madison took a second longer to respond. When she finally appeared at the aisle, her smile was still there, but thinner. Ma'am? Vanessa straightened her back like she was preparing for a courtroom statement. I need to speak to someone in authority, please. Madison's face didn't change much, but there was a flicker of something behind her eyes. I'm the cabin supervisor on this flight. Is there something I can clarify for you? Vanessa's voice dropped low, but her words came faster, more clipped. I'd like to speak to the chief crew member, or the captain, whichever one of them handles passenger concerns like this. A ripple moved through the cabin. Someone 3 rows back let out a faint, knowing laugh. Madison remained professional, but her shoulders stiffened slightly. The captain is currently occupied with flight preparation and won't be available prior to takeoff, but I'll do everything I can to help you. Vanessa's jaw tensed, her composure slipping just a little. Marcus still hadn't said a word. His hands rested calmly on his closed laptop, his gaze steady, watching her. Like this was all too familiar. She lowered her voice another notch, carefully, almost sweetly. I just don't feel safe sitting here. The sentence landed like a brick. Madison's pleasant expression fell away entirely, replaced by something blank and businesslike. Marcus didn't blink. The Bluetooth guy across the aisle sighed heavily. Here we go again, he muttered under his breath. Madison squared her shoulders. I'm going to need you to clarify that statement, ma'am. Vanessa folded her hands neatly, tilting her head just enough to seem innocent. I'm not making any accusations, she said smoothly. I'm simply saying I don't feel comfortable remaining in this seat. I think, for everyone's peace of mind, it would be best if this seating arrangement were adjusted. Marcus slowly lifted his gaze, locking eyes with her for the first time. His stare didn't waver. It didn't flinch. And for the first time that day, Vanessa felt the smallest crack of doubt. Are you saying you feel unsafe? Vanessa tilted her head, giving a half-hearted shrug. I wouldn't put it like that. I just don't feel comfortable, that's all. From across the aisle, A man with a Bluetooth headset let out an audible scoff. "Wow, unbelievable," he muttered. 3 rows back, a college-aged woman raised her phone, pretending to scroll, but it was obvious she was recording. Whispers stirred throughout first class, heads turning, conversations pausing. Vanessa noticed. She felt it. The energy in the cabin was shifting, and not in her favor. But backing down, that wasn't her style. "This is a simple request," she pressed on, voice dripping with false politeness. "I'm only asking for a little flexibility. If I'm uncomfortable, I should have the right to switch seats, shouldn't I?" Madison's jaw tensed. "Ma'am, I've already double-checked. There are no other available seats in first class." Vanessa's lips pulled tight. "And what about coach?" Madison hesitated for the briefest second before responding. "There are 2 open seats back there." Vanessa sat up straighter, finding what she thought was her victory. "Then he can move." A low murmur of disbelief swept through the rows. Marcus sat still, breathing slowly, his fingertips resting lightly on his closed laptop. No reaction, no protest. Just waiting. Madison blinked, as if needing a second to process what she'd just heard. "Ma'am," she said, her tone dipping lower. "Just so I'm clear, you want me to remove this passenger from first class and place him in economy? Because you don't want to sit next to him?" Vanessa nodded, her spine straightening like she'd just won a round. "Yes." Madison inhaled sharply through her nose. "That's not happening." Vanessa's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" Madison's posture was like steel now. "Mr. Reed purchased a first-class ticket just like you. He is sitting in his assigned seat. I cannot, and will not, ask him to move." Vanessa's face went pale, then flushed bright pink. She could feel the weight of the stares now. Full-blown attention, whispered conversations, shaking heads. The girl with the phone was still filming. Vanessa's throat tightened. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "I'm simply asking for the same accommodation anyone else would get if they were uncomfortable." Madison didn't blink. "You're asking me to remove a paying passenger from his assigned seat and downgrade him for no legitimate reason. That's not an accommodation, ma'am. That's discrimination." The air went still. Someone let out a low whistle. Marcus didn't move, still silent, just staring at her like he'd seen this play out before. Vanessa's heart pounded against her ribcage. This wasn't going according to plan. Madison stood her ground. "Ma'am, we're preparing for departure. If you're unable to remain seated and comply with crew instructions, I'll have no choice but to ask you to leave the aircraft." Vanessa's stomach flipped. "Wait, what?" Madison's voice didn't waver. "You have 2 options. Remain seated quietly or deplane. But Mr. Reed is staying right where he is." A small wave of applause broke out near the back of first class. Vanessa's face burned hot. Her vision blurred at the edges. This wasn't supposed to happen. She opened her mouth, desperate for some kind of comeback, when Marcus finally moved. Controlled. Without saying a word, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a slim leather case. He flipped it open with practiced ease. The polished FBI badge caught the light overhead. The entire cabin froze. The air inside the cabin shifted like a ripple through still water. Vanessa froze, her entire posture going stiff. Passengers gasped, and a couple of them even let out quiet laughs. The young woman with the phone? She immediately zoomed in, capturing every second. Marcus's voice stayed calm, steady, completely unreadable. "Ma'am," he said smoothly, tilting his head ever so slightly. "Would you like to file an official report? I can take your statement right here." Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. Words wouldn't come. Marcus didn't blink, didn't flinch. He just sat there with the badge still open, eyes steady on hers. For the first time that morning, Vanessa felt cornered. But this wasn't just embarrassment anymore. Now there were real consequences staring her in the face. The tension inside the plane grew thicker with every passing second. The FBI emblem glinted sharply under the overhead lights, impossible to ignore, impossible to deny. All around her, passengers who moments earlier had stayed quiet were now wide-eyed and staring openly, some smirking, others whispering. Vanessa's throat went dry. Her mind scrambled for any kind of explanation or exit strategy, but there was none that didn't make her look worse. The man she had just accused, the man she had implied was a threat, was now sitting calmly, revealing himself as federal law enforcement. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment she felt dizzy. Marcus's face stayed expressionless. He wasn't gloating, wasn't smug. Waiting. "Would you like to give a statement?" he repeated, voice low and measured, as if he were discussing the weather. Vanessa's stomach twisted painfully. This was spiraling out of her control faster than she could manage. She tried to answer, but all that came out was a faint, broken I. Marcus tilted his head again, his tone still professional, but unmistakably sharp. "You mentioned feeling unsafe. That's a serious claim, especially on a federal flight. If you believe there's been misconduct on my part, I'll be happy to document your concerns and report them through official channels." Another wave of heat rose up her neck. Vanessa could feel it, the eyes on her, the disbelief, the judgment. Just minutes earlier, she had felt confident, certain, assumed the situation would tilt in her favor like it always did. But now, the power dynamic had flipped completely. 2 rows up, a man with a laptop let out a low chuckle. "Oh, this is rich," he mumbled under his breath. The girl with the phone, still recording. Across the aisle, Madison stood stiffly, arms crossed at her waist, her expression neutral. But her eyes, they said it all. Vanessa's heart raced. If she doubled down now, if she pushed this further, she'd be formally accusing an FBI agent of being a danger on a commercial flight. The legal weight of that hit her full force. Her hands trembled in her lap. No escape, no easy undo. Marcus didn't look away. He just waited. Finally, after what felt like forever, Vanessa gave the smallest shake of her head. "Barely a movement," she whispered, her voice thin and hollow. No complaint. Marcus gave a slow, almost expected nod. Then, without another word, he closed his badge case, tucked it back into his jacket, reopened his laptop, and began typing again like nothing had happened. For him, the moment was over. For Vanessa, the real fallout was just beginning. From the seats around her, a few scattered passengers murmured softly, some with disapproval, some with clear amusement, at the spectacle she had just created for herself. A few scattered claps broke the awkward silence. The businessman across the aisle smirked, flipping his newspaper back open like the whole thing had been just another form of entertainment. The young woman with the phone? She was already typing furiously. Vanessa's heart pounded against her ribcage. She wanted to sink into the floor, disappear entirely, rewind time, and erase the last 10 minutes. But there was no erasing this. No undo button for what had just happened. She had humiliated herself, and worse, she had done it in front of an entire plane full of witnesses. Eyes lingered on her, curious, judgmental, some even pitying. She glanced around, desperate for a sympathetic face, but found none. Even Madison, the flight attendant who had handled her with professional grace, now stood at a distance, the warmth in her expression long gone. Vanessa's throat tightened. She wanted to protest, wanted to reclaim control somehow, but the truth hung heavy in the air. There was nothing left to say. The plane hadn't even left the tarmac, and yet she had already lost. But her humiliation wasn't done unraveling. Vanessa sat frozen in her seat, staring at the back of the headrest in front of her, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her face burned hotter than it ever had. Marcus had moved on like she was invisible. His laptop was open again, his fingers tapping away on the keys, focused, detached. The rest of the cabin, though? They hadn't moved on. Not even close. The businessman with the Bluetooth earpiece gave a low chuckle before scrolling back through his emails. The young woman with the phone had paused her typing, but kept her device angled just right, like she was waiting to capture one more reaction. Madison stood near the galley now, her arms crossed, her gaze flickering toward Vanessa every so often, as if waiting for another outburst. Vanessa felt the weight of every glance, every unspoken word in that cabin. The humiliation pressed against her chest like a brick. Her hands twitched against her skirt, restless and shaking. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding she could wave away with charm or fake laughter. This was something else entirely. She had tried to get an FBI agent removed from first class, on camera. The enormity of it hit her like a gut punch. Her lips parted but no sound came out. Madison stepped back over to her row, her voice lower now, more clipped. "Ma'am," she said carefully but firmly, "I need your confirmation that you're able to remain seated for the duration of this flight without any more disruptions." Vanessa froze. A couple passengers glanced over from nearby rows, pretending not to listen, but very much eavesdropping. The indignation bubbled inside her, rising to her throat like bile. She wanted to argue, wanted to cry out that she wasn't the problem, that all she'd done was voice a simple concern. But that gold FBI badge had rewritten the entire narrative. Any power she thought she had was gone now. Swallowed. Replaced by the growing awareness that she was one bad decision away from being escorted off the plane in front of everyone. She forced her trembling lips into a tight, artificial smile. "I'm fine," she managed. Madison's gaze lingered on her for an extra beat, like she didn't fully believe her, then gave a slow nod. "Because I'm going to hold you to that." And with that, Madison walked away, leaving Vanessa to stew in the heat of her own disgrace. Vanessa exhaled shakily, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles pale. Maybe it was over. At least, that's what she told herself, until she heard the soft ping of a notification. Her stomach dropped. She glanced sideways just in time to see the young woman with the phone grinning down at her screen, her thumbs moving quickly. The girl tapped her screen twice with satisfaction, then slid her phone back onto her tray table. Vanessa's stomach twisted into knots. She knew that look. She'd seen that exact expression on her grandkids' faces when they sent something viral. Vanessa's breath hitched, her chest tightened. She turned her head slightly, her pulse thudding in her ears, and caught just enough of the screen before it disappeared from view. The video was already online. The caption was short, devastating, and in bold text, "Woman tries to have black FBI agent removed from first class. Instantly regrets it." Vanessa's hands went ice cold. The flight wasn't even in the air yet, and somehow she had already lost. And now that the video had surfaced online, there was no stopping what came next. Vanessa stared straight ahead, fighting to steady her breathing, silently begging herself to believe it wouldn't blow up. Maybe it wouldn't get traction. Maybe people wouldn't care. Maybe it would disappear by morning. Maybe. The buzz from her purse cut through that fragile hope like a knife. One vibration, then another, then a third. Her pulse surged as dread crawled up her spine. She didn't want to check. She already knew. But her hands moved anyway, fingers fumbling inside her bag until they found her phone. The screen lit up, and with it, her stomach sank. Incoming texts. From friends, from distant relatives she hadn't spoken to in ages, even from casual acquaintances who normally wouldn't give her the time of day. Each message worse than the last. "Vanessa, please tell me this isn't you. Are you seriously trending right now? What the hell did you do?" She swallowed hard. Her heart pounded so violently she could barely steady her fingers as she opened her browser and tapped on Twitter. The app loaded with brutal speed. There it was, her name, right there in the trending tab. The video, uploaded less than 10 minutes ago, was already sitting at over 25,000 views. She scrolled, and the comments. "This is peak entitlement. Instant karma, and I'm here for it. Lady really thought she could flex her way out of a federal seat? LMAO FBI plot twist? Chef's kiss." Her vision blurred. Her ears rang. Her chest felt like it was caving in. This wasn't just embarrassing anymore. This was catastrophic. Her carefully constructed life, the reputation she'd spent years curating, it was burning in real time, pixel by pixel, comment by comment. And for the first time, Vanessa understood something terrifying. There was no undoing this. But what came after the plane landed, that would push her humiliation even further than she thought possible. Vanessa clutched her phone so tightly her knuckles went pale. The dull roar of the cabin faded behind the drumbeat of her own panic. She kept refreshing the page, helpless to stop herself as the view count climbed higher and higher with each tap. 30,000, then 42, then well past 65,000 in what felt like seconds. The notifications wouldn't stop. Comment after comment, mention after mention. screenshots circulating faster than she could read them. We need her name. Expose her. People like this deserve to go viral. Can someone confirm Dallas to DC flight? Her stomach churned, her eyes darted around the cabin, hoping, praying for some kind of cosmic rewind button. But the other passengers weren't looking at her anymore. They didn't need to. They had seen enough. They knew. Every glance she caught only confirmed it. People whispered. Some smiled knowingly. Others pulled out their phones like they were waiting for the next chapter of this slow-motion disaster. Vanessa's entire body locked up. Next to her, Marcus hadn't moved. He was still typing, focused, detached, like none of this had touched him at all. That somehow made it worse. Another buzz from her phone made her flinch. Her sister this time. Vanessa stared at the caller ID, frozen. For a split second, she almost answered. Almost. But her thumb hovered for only a second before she hit decline with a trembling touch. Not yet. She couldn't face that conversation. Not while she was still sitting here, trapped, powerless, and spiraling. The plane hadn't even left the runway, and her world was already in freefall. She took a shaky breath, swallowing back the nausea creeping up her throat. She needed a strategy, a way to spin this. Maybe a public apology? That would pour gasoline on the fire. Maybe if she ignored it, pretended not to see it. But deep down she already knew. There was no coming back from this. That was worse. Her thoughts spiraled, crashing into each other like waves in a storm. Then the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Washington, D.C. Local time is 5:43 p.m. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened for landing." Vanessa's stomach dropped. Landing. For the last hour, she'd been so consumed by the disaster unfolding at 30,000 feet that she'd forgotten what was waiting for her on the ground. She refreshed the video one more time. 97,000 views. Her name sat in bold under trending topics. Her hands trembled as she shoved her phone into her purse, whispering useless reassurances to herself. Maybe it wouldn't be as bad as she feared. Maybe it would all blow over. Maybe. But Vanessa still clung to that fragile hope, until she stepped off the plane and walked into Reagan National's arrivals hall. Her heart seized. Near the baggage area stood a small cluster of reporters. Not dozens, not yet, but enough. One woman in a navy blazer stood in front of a camera, mic raised, reading from her phone. The now viral clip shows a woman attempting to have an FBI agent removed from first class, citing personal discomfort. The footage has climbed past 1 million views in just a few hours. Vanessa froze mid-step. 1 million. That couldn't be right. Her pulse skyrocketed. Desperate, she turned away, hoping to melt into the crowd, but one of the reporters spotted her. Their eyes locked. The woman's expression shifted from professional focus to sudden recognition. Wait, that's her. Vanessa's throat tightened. Without thinking, she spun on her heel and bolted. Her heels echoed sharply against the airport floor as she weaved through startled travelers. She needed to reach the exit, fast. Her phone buzzed wildly inside her purse. Dozens of notifications, texts, missed calls, push alerts from apps she hadn't opened in months. It was like the universe itself was screaming her name. Pushing past a family dragging roller bags, she barely made it to the curb when she heard it again, someone shouting behind her. "Miss Hartwell, do you have any comment about the video?" Her heart sank. Her name. They were using her full name already. A cab slowed near the pickup zone and she practically dove into the back seat. "Drive, now." She snapped at the driver. He blinked at her in the rearview mirror, but pulled away without a word. Vanessa pressed both hands to her forehead, squeezing her eyes shut. 1 million views. Her pulse hammered. Everything she'd worked to build, a spotless social standing, professional networks, charity boards, civic groups. It was all slipping through her fingers. Her phone buzzed again. This time the number wasn't one she recognized. Hesitating, she stared at the screen until the last second before answering with a trembling voice. A pause. Then a cold, clipped voice filled her ear. "Miss Hartwell, this is Robert Langston with the Bayfield Foundation Board." Her stomach flipped. She had served on that board for almost 8 years. The organization was known for its public campaigns on diversity and inclusion. She already knew where this was headed. "I assume you're aware of the situation," Robert continued. Vanessa swallowed hard. "If you'd just let me explain—" "We're going to need your resignation," he said flatly, cutting her off. "Immediately. The board has voted. A public statement goes out in the morning." The call ended. She lowered the phone, staring at it blankly. There was no discussion, no second chance. It was over. Her position, her public image, her influence, all gone before the plane wheels even hit the runway. And the worst part? No one cared about her side of the story. No one was interested in context. They had seen the footage, and that was enough. Vanessa let out a shaking breath, her chest hollow. The avalanche she had set in motion with one entitled decision couldn't be stopped now. Meanwhile, just a few miles away, Special Agent Marcus Reed had probably already forgotten about her. By now, he was likely sitting in a conference room somewhere downtown, sipping coffee, preparing for his next briefing, completely unaffected. For him, today had been routine. For Vanessa Hartwell, it had been the day her life fell apart. If this story struck a nerve, don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that remind us actions always have consequences.